Well, good evening everybody and welcome to the train. And my name is John Durrant, and this evening on the train we have with us Gary Armstrong. And Gary Armstrong is a Druid. Now I expected to see somebody in a long robe with a big hood and a cape and a nice staff.
E-ball.
But Gary is a professional. And now then, so to speak. Okay. Not that kind of professional. Right, Gary. So tell me, what is Druidry?
Well, I suppose before I kind of say what is Druidry, it's probably a good idea to maybe touch on really who were the Druids first.
Okay.
And because we will be making a distinction between the Druids of old, the ancient Druids, and modern day Druidry, and there will be a difference. So obviously when we look at the Druids from days of old, from the dates of the Roman invasion, let's say for instance,
Yep.
we don't have an awful lot of information about them. All we can rely upon is the writings of the Roman writer Tacitus and a couple of others whose names escape me. Who chronicled really what they observed of, or what they say they observed of the Druids in Britain when they invaded.
My impression of Druids, ancient Druids, are that they are Celts. And I also have this vision in my head of Druids looking a little like Saxons on stones, floating above ley lines, rushing around the countryside like the best kind of electric train you could possibly find. I suppose that's a bit of a myth.
Slightly.
Okay.
Depends what drugs they're on.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
But ultimately, from the writings that we have, what we do know is that they were philosophers, they were educators,
Okay.
they were the intelligentsia of the time,
Okay.
and also too they led the kind of spiritual direction for the particular tribes where they were head of.
So if you're saying they were philosophers, why am I thinking that Druids are a religious order?
That's the first I've heard of it. They're not a religious order.
Okay, fair enough. So they're not a religious order?
No. There have been some kind of media speculation, certainly with regards to a Druid organisation called the Druid Network, where it was ruled, there was a court ruling, that they were carrying out religious activities, so they were protected activities, but that didn't mean that Druidry was a religion as such. It's not. Personally, I'd be offended if somebody was to say that it was a religion.
Why?
Because it's a philosophy which kind of underpins, I suppose, what could be what it could underpin, I would say, most faith paths.
Okay, so what's wrong with your religion then?
Well, personally, an awful lot, but I think it certainly has a role in society.
Yeah.
But from an organisational point of view, well, first off, it's organised. There's dictated, there's dogma.
Dogma, yeah.
And that's really where
Okay.
I suppose we depart really from into say modern day Druidry, because there is no real dogma. You are quite free to kind of form your own beliefs and form your own opinions on various things.
So are you saying to me that Druids actually are quite fluid,
Yeah.
and they can be virtually anything?
I think there are some fundamental aspects to Druidry,
Okay.
which I think are just that fundamental. There's like a line of continuity which runs through modern Druidry, which I think most Druids would kind of say, yes, I accept that.
Okay. What sort of things would they be? What's the fundamental thing about Druidry?
I think it certainly the interconnectivity of everything.
Well, that's interesting. That is interesting.
And when we think of the interconnectivity of everything, that informs our moral kind of code as well. Because if we are connected to each other and we're connected to the land, and this will come to, I suppose, should you ask later on about what Druids believe, what we touch on really is we've got we believe that we are connected to everything. So whether land, sea, sky, animals,
You've
each
brought
other.
you've brought it up actually. You said, "What do you believe? What do you believe?" I mean, the thing is this. For example, spiritualists believe that there's a life after death and that we live on and we can communicate with that world. Christians believe in God. Muslims believe in Muhammad, etc., or Allah. So, what do Druids believe?
Again, I think we've already touched on it, is that there's no hard and fast rules really in terms of what Druids believe. There are some fundamental kind of aspects to it, such as the interconnectivity of everything. That seems to be something which most Druids kind of tap into and say, yes, I accept that. But also too, we've got the likes of our moral code. You know, in other words, if we are interconnected, why would we then hurt our planet? Why would we then hurt each other? Why would we then...
So the interconnection of everything is not just interconnection of people, it's the interconnection of people with things.
Yes.
So I'm not, look, don't take this the wrong way, and I am not being in any way detrimental, but you hugging a tree is not necessarily out of order.
Unless the tree objects.
I'm an ent. Yeah, okay. So, but what I'm trying to say here is that I was in Sefton Park yesterday.
Okay.
We went to the Fairy Glen. I don't know if you know the Fairy Glen in Sefton Park.
I don't know, I've heard.
Oh, it's absolutely fabulous, and it was so quiet and peaceful.
Yeah.
And I remember saying that it was just you could feel the peace and quiet. I mean, I know that sounds ridiculous, but you could feel the peace and quiet.
Yeah.
And I assume it's a similar thing that you're talking about. Nature,
Yes.
the trees, just the water flowing, it all has an energy of its own.
Well, for instance, I suppose you could... I mean, people describe many kind of spiritual experiences, don't they? They in whatever faith path they come from. You know, for me personally, I think the most profound spiritual experiences I've had have been stood on a rock face, facing the sea.
Oh yes.
And feeling the rumble of the land underneath you as the waves hit because then you've got the air, you've got all the elements wrapped into one. Yep. You've got the sun beating down, and you've got the water, and you've got the land.
And it all comes together.
And it comes together.
Now then, you mentioned the other week when I was talking to you about how you got introduced into Druidry in the first place.
Sure.
And I've got something particular in mind. If you don't mention it, I will. Carry on.
Okay. No, it's fine.
Tell me.
So how did I become a Druid?
Yeah.
I think fundamentally, since very early childhood, I've always had a connection with the outdoors. And I was brought up as quite a strict Christian, and it never really fitted for me.
Yeah.
And I think whilst I don't really kind of, and we'll touch on this later, I'm sure, but I don't fundamentally have a belief in a particular God as such. I thought that if I was going to be close to a creator, I had to be closer to creation.
That's interesting.
Now, that was a kind of central tenet to what I believed back then.
Yeah.
Obviously, things have evolved since then for me personally in terms of my philosophy. But that's what I felt. I felt as though I needed more of a connection to the land, and I think that's really where people do come to Druidry or to paganism in general. Is that we have become so far disconnected from the land and from nature, and we need the kind of philosophy and the spirituality and the ideas to kind of reconnect us.
Okay. Let me. You mentioned one of the things you mentioned to me was, when we look at things like Christianity, when we look at spiritualism, when we look at various organised religions, they believe in a life after death, and they believe in that energy that we have going on in one way or another. Mm-hmm. You mentioned to me that you were attracted to the order that you're in because you're in Anglesey and you had a particular experience?
I've had experiences outside of Anglesey, but I've always felt a connection to North
But you
Wales.
talked about a stone circle.
In the Lake District, yes.
Ah, well, I've got that wrong. Okay, fair enough.
Just saying.
You could have gone along with it
We
and
didn't
said...
prepare this, honest.
No, you could have gone along with it. Okay, so you had an experience with a stone circle in the Lake District.
Yes.
Okay. Would you like to tell us about that, please?
Yes, I was 12. And ironically, my mum, God rest her soul, was obviously brought me up as a very strict Christian. And we ironically got taken to a stone circle in Cumbria called Long Meg and her Daughters. And there's some mythology or legend around that particular stone circle, but ultimately it's one of the largest stone circles in Britain. Some of the stones are toppled, but it's beautiful. For me personally, as soon as I got there, it was just, I felt at home. And that's not to say that you need a stone circle.
I'm going to say, Gary, we're talking about a circle of stones here.
But that's not to say that you need a circle of stones to feel at home. You don't. It can be anywhere. But for me personally, as a 12-year-old, I was always fascinated with them, and so it was natural for me to kind of feel a connection there, I suppose.
This brings me quite naturally to Stonehenge,
Okay.
which is supposed to be a Druid thing.
Okay.
Okay, that's it. Okay, fair enough. That's
Well, no, I mean, it's the question.
it is a question. I mean, tell me, what then is Stonehenge to the Druids? Or isn't it?
We know that Druids use it. Certainly modern day Druids use it
Okay.
as a ceremonial site. Certainly you can see certain Druids there at the solstice, say, for instance.
Yeah.
In terms of who built it,
Who knows?
who knows?
Okay.
We don't know. What
It's
we do know,
Facebook.
what we do know is that the stones were there a long time before the Druids.
Okay, so we know that.
Yeah.
So, well, that brings me to another question, which I must hang on to for a minute. So, Stonehenge has an altar.
Has an altar stone.
Go on. Has an altar stone, which we call it an altar. Has a stone table,
Sure.
and at a certain point in the year,
Yes.
the sun shines through an archway onto that stone table in a particular format.
Okay. Yes, it does.
Yes, it does. Okay. Now, does that have any significance with Druids, or is it just significant with pagan philosophy or pagan belief in general?
Well, generally, paganism celebrates life in all its glory, whether we're talking about life, death, or rebirth, and Stonehenge is no different in that sense, because what we see when the sun rises and hits that certain particular point on the solstice, people spend more time in the circle and don't realise what's actually going on outside the circle. And this is where this particular thing gets a little bit risque.
Go on.
Because what we actually see is the building of a phallus in terms of the reflection,
Oh, right.
and that then is centred into the circle, which obviously it's a fertility aspect.
Absolutely.
And we can only surmise that that's potentially what our ancestors were thinking when.
Yeah, I think we've become far too fey about these things. I mean, our ancestors did, and paganism does worship the fertility of things.
Sex and death, John.
And
That's too
taxes. Yeah, but it's true, isn't it? And we get very embarrassed about all this.
Why?
But exactly why. The other thing I was going to ask though about that is the light shines in a particular way on that, and you've just explained something to me which I didn't know. Now then, pyramids.
Okay.
I know we're drifting off here a bit, but pyramids said to have a particular part of the pyramid where the sun shines through an opening
Yes.
into the centre of the pyramid at a particular time,
Yeah.
and this can happen right round the world wherever there are pyramid sites. This happens.
Yeah.
Now, is there any connection, or is it really all done by aliens?
Yeah.
Don't get me started.
That was your show.
That was your show.
Right.
I suppose really what we have got, when we look at it in all its objectivity,
Yep.
is we've got a set of people roughly around the same time building monuments in observance of the land around them and the cycles that they're observing. So it seems natural for the Celts or whoever our ancestors were at the time to be building monuments in Britain, let's say, for instance,
Yeah.
as it would be normal, I suppose, for the Egyptians to be building monuments in their particular locale, doing exactly the same thing that they would be.
And then this happens again in South America.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I can see that. I can see that. That's interesting.
In Jungian terms, in Jungian psychology terms, we talk about a collective unconscious. In other words, collectively, we're unconscious of the fact that we're doing the same things. But
This collective unconscious is something which has come up before, and in actual fact, there's been some work recently on collective unconscious, and been experiments on why football crowds, for example,
tribal aspect.
all start the tribal aspect. They all start chanting the same thing at the same time.
Yeah.
How come one set of supporters on one side of the pitch start with the same supporting side, start chanting similar things on the other side of the pitch?
Sure.
And there's been quite a lot of work on that, and it's quite interesting to see. I'd love to see where that goes.
Yeah.
But that's gone. It's gone
We
away.
digress.
We digress. Yeah, but what don't you expect to? So, what then? We were talking about ancient druids, and we're talking about modern druidism.
Okay.
Do ancient druids actually still? I mean, I know they don't actually still exist because they're ancient, and by virtue of that, they're not here anymore. But does their belief or their philosophy still continue, or have modern druids changed it?
Well, I suppose modern day druids don't have really an inkling as to what our ancient druids did, because we just don't know. We can only kind of build a picture, I suppose, from using our sacred sites, that the fact that they must have observed the land and the world around them quite intensely, in order to make sense of what they were experiencing.
Okay.
So in terms of when we translate that into more modern day druidry, we have various festivals which kind of link us, seasonal festivals should I say, that link us to various aspects such as the solstices, the equinoxes and the fire festivals that we would.
Okay, so would any of this? I mean, I mentioned before about riding rocks on ley lines. Okay, we had a good laugh, which was quite interesting. But does magic come into any of this?
Yes and no.
That's a good answer.
Well,
Rhinestones.
it's a difficult question to ask, because again it's bordering into that subject as to, you know, what do druids believe, and some druids practice magic
Yeah.
in what they understand to be magic. Some don't. Some simply honour the land and honour the seasonal festivals to connect them to those particular cycles. Some do. Some believe that their intent causes change, and yeah, you know, I can see the power of that. Certainly when we talk of energy, but
Energy actually seems to be a theme which is going through just about everything that we end up discussing on the train, and we end up talking to people. And
funny that, isn't it?
well, no, it is funny, or it is. I didn't expect it.
No.
I really didn't expect that. I didn't expect it to be coming out like that when I first started doing this,
No.
and I find it really quite interesting that that's the way it's moving and that's the way it's going. But what I was about to say, in actual fact, with some of the, can I use the word rituals?
Can, yeah.
Would there be rituals? And
There are.
I mean, how often do druids get together and practice their philosophy? Is it a bit like going to church every Sunday, or is it a matter of just when the solstices occur?
No. I suppose The typical times for us to get together would be throughout the seasonal festivals. So there's 8 in total.
Okay, right.
We follow. The easiest way to describe it would be to describe it as a wheel. So when we talk of a wheel with various spokes, running through the centre of that wheel is the solstices. So we've got the summer solstice and the winter solstice. Crossed over that is the equinoxes.
Explain for the purpose of everybody what an equinox is.
It's where the sun and moon are in, where the sun is in equidistance.
Equidistance from that's with equinox. Okay.
Yes.
So solstice.
Yes.
Where does that come from?
It's where the sun is at the highest point and at the lowest point.
So it's sol, sun. Okay. So all these things are taking their names even from ancient use of language.
Yes. Yes, they are.
Okay. So we've got those 4. So you said 8.
Yeah, there is. So we've then got after say Yule or the winter solstice, we've then got Imbolc, which is the first of the kind of spring festivals. It celebrates the kind of quickening of the light and the gentle warming of the land as well.
Is this where you get well dressing, or is that nothing to do with it?
It may well be, certainly in terms
May well be.
But yeah, I didn't intend that. But yeah, it may well be. There are some. What you do find is within certain folk customs, they are linked back to to pagan.
In actual fact, I'm now my mind's now working on other things. It's totally on the natural stuff that we get. Things like maypole dancing and various other little festivals and things which occur. The burning of effigies at the end of harvest.
Okay.
Harvest festivals, which in actual fact they are a pagan or an ancient worship celebration.
There is some evidence of it being.
And yet we're still taking tins of beans into church at the end of September or whenever it is to celebrate a festival, which in actual fact is a pagan festival, basically.
Why not?
Yeah, I would say why not, but then again, if you go into church and say that,
Yeah, most priests will accept that their festivals, certainly within the Catholic faith, have a link to paganism. Certainly within the festival I just mentioned of Imbolc, you've got St. Bridget or St. Breed. She's certainly the goddess of spring in that sense.
yeah.
So you've got the crossover between St. Bridget and Breed. Spelled the same.
And who did you mention before that?
She's known as the goddess of spring.
The goddess.
She's the maiden.
Now you're talking about gods and goddesses.
But you're jumping ahead.
Okay, go on.
Because what you've actually wanted to talk about was also to the seasonal festival.
Yes.
So
Thank you very much for that.
We talk about Imbolc. We also then talk about the equinox, which comes thereafter.
Yeah.
And then directly after that, in which we're still kind of in the throes of this festival at the moment, is Beltane, which roughly comes in around about the 1st of May.
Okay.
Which you've touched on the May Day festivals.
May seems to be a big one for festivals, doesn't
It's a
it?
massive festival for
Yeah.
certainly in terms of paganism. We usually, me personally, Beltane tends to happen when I see the hawthorns in blossom.
Well, it's the start of everything, isn't it?
It's the kick-off, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it is the big kind of fertility rite as well. Certainly with, you just mentioned the maypole, there is a direct sexual reference to the maypole.
Well, I know. Yeah, I'm aware of that. And although we'd like to discuss that at length,
Yeah, we like to discuss
I think that we have a lady present. So
That's debatable.
okay, what, the present or the lady? No, don't let's go there. Okay, we've got it is. I mean, one of the things I like actually about paganism and pagan rites and the ancient stuff is they weren't embarrassed about the sex. They weren't embarrassed about the let's get our clothes off and celebrate this.
More a modern thing, that though, isn't it?
What, getting your clothes off?
Yeah, because we don't know that they've got the clothes off really, do we?
No,
just
but
need
I
an
like.
excuse now.
Yeah, just, I think I'll become a druid. Okay. No. Okay. Leaving that to one side before we get too far, and she encourages me too much. Tell me about gods, because I can see a platform approaching in the distance.
But you've also
Go on. What have I
missed
missed now?
You've missed out the whole other half of the year.
Go on.
The seasonal festivals.
I will get to these gods eventually.
You will.
Tell me about the other half of the year, please.
Okay. Directly after the solstice, which comes after Beltane, you've then got the first harvest festival, which is, some call it Lunasa. There are other names for it, such as Lammas.
The what? Sorry.
Lunasa.
Lunasa.
Direct from the word Lu, which I think is a sun god.
It's a moon. Loon.
No, Loon
Okay.
is Lu.
Okay.
And then after that, you've then got the.
You've forgotten.
My mind's just gone completely blank. I can hear you in the background. So we've got Lunas, and then we've got the equinox again, and then or some may call that Mabon, but for me personally, it's the equinox.
Okay.
And then directly after that, which is in polar opposite to the spring festival, is we then have what I suppose we would class it as Halloween, but for us it's Samhain, or in the Welsh.
Halloween.
Yeah.
Samhain. Now, what does that mean to you? Because I know Halloween, in if you're going to celebrate Halloween, you expect the kids to come round knocking on your door and asking for sweets and stuff, trick or treat. But what does Halloween mean? What did you call it?
Samhain.
Samhain
is one name. In the Welsh tradition, Nos Calangaeth is the other.
Okay.
But ultimately, it's the last harvest festival. It's the big fire festival, and as with Beltane, it's considered that the veil between this world and the next is at its thinnest, and which is why we get the references from ghosts and ghouls, etc.
And yeah, because they're all coming into the. Oh right, that's really. Why is it? Do you think that it's always the ghosts and the ghouls that we're seeing, and we're not seeing all the angels and the, or do they come at the other end?
See, certainly in my druidry, I don't do the whole kind of Halloween stuff. For me, it's a time of remembrance. It's a time of remembering our ancestors, and our rituals and our celebrations at that particular time are about our family that we've lost and loved. And some have like a feast,
Yeah.
and some would leave like a space at the table for our loved ones and invite them back for in a figurative, memorable term.
That's something which happens quite a lot, doesn't it?
It does. You see that through other.
Yeah, through a lot of things where they leave a space at the table.
Yeah.
For loved ones. I think that's really nice, actually. I'm really interested in that, actually, because I like this idea. I like the idea of it being the veil is the thinnest at that point.
Yes.
So you can, in actual fact, find it easier to move across.
Yeah.
Yeah, and perhaps see to the other side.
Some would say. Yeah.
But I can't. What I find difficult with that is the fact that it is all linked up with ghosts and ghouls, or are they the ones who are most interested in getting across that little thinner bridge at that point in time? I don't know. Perhaps we just.
I think society tries to make it more palatable, doesn't it? Really.
Perhaps we'll just leave that in the ether for people to play around with, because I want to talk to you about gods.
Really?
Yes. You didn't get that, did you? No. I haven't been trying to get that one in there. Okay. Just to move into this, I mean, most religions talk about one God, the one God, and yet they worship a whole set of carved images of things like the Virgin Mary, and they have Jesus is always on a cross. They've always got the devil's always got horns, etc., etc. Do you have gods?
I think some druids do. I think it depends on the individual, and it depends upon the mythology which they follow. And I think this is an important thing too, because throughout druidry brings back the stories of our ancestors. It's a really important facet. So most druids, that the ancestral stories come back, because that's our way of connecting to our ancestors as to what they might have believed.
Okay.
Now, don't get me wrong. Certainly within Welsh mythology, no, we don't believe they actually happened. We don't believe that they took place and that they are a real story. Sorry, a real happening.
Really? Okay.
Well, to be fair,
Okay.
they'd be quite difficult in some circumstances. But what we do trying to see is the underlying message from that mythology. And certainly sometimes within that mythology you do get various deities, whether that be a demigod, a smaller god, or
Whatever.
So it does depend.
I have to say, I'm finding that it's quite interesting hearing what you're saying about this, the underlying belief, it's the underlying reason for. And we find that conventional religion will often say the same thing. It's not what that thing is actually saying or doing, but it's the fact that it's the underlying view, it's the underlying, Christ died on the cross for our sins, etc. Now, okay, I saw the look on your face. It's okay, you couldn't hide it.
And I think the thing is, you touched on a really interesting point there, because you talked about conventional religion,
Yeah.
and what we're actually talking about is revealed religions. So we're talking about things which are then spoon-fed.
Okay, revealed religions?
Well, the stories of the Bible, let's say, for instance, are revealed to us. In other words, they're revealed. This is what it means, this happened, and
Yeah.
this is what it means.
Okay.
And whereas Druidry and paganism generally isn't a revealed religion, it's a kind of a philosophy where
It's
it's
evolved. It's evolved more than being revealed or taught. It's an evolved religion.
Yeah.
The thing I find about conventional religion is, excuse me, it's often written in a book.
Yes.
And it's been there, and I've said this before, it's been there to actually keep the masses down, to give them a set of rules to be afraid of.
Some would say that, yeah.
You're being very nice, if I may say so. Some may say that. Yeah, okay. We'll leave it with that.
I'll give you a reason why I'm being kind of nice or gentle about it. Is that, I think for me as a Druid, I see my role is to be able to accept other people's faith. It might not feel right for me.
Okay.
But if you believe that Jesus is your saviour, then
Jesus is your saviour.
Then that's true for you. Whereas I don't look for truth or falsity. I look for what feels right. I don't look for black or white. I look for the shade of grey, and see the different and see the kind of differences.
Wow, I am loving that, and that's not sarcastic. I'm really loving that. I think that's a really good way to be, because it's accepting of things.
Yes.
Whereas so many religions just simply don't accept anything else. If it's that my way or the highway.
There's a lot. Certainly, you find it in certain pagan circles too, and I mean circles in a loose sense. I don't mean in terms of organisations and stuff or groups of people. But you find sometimes that there's animosity, or there's some kind of conflict between pagans and Christians, and I don't think that that's right. I think there has to be an acceptance of both. Yes, you get a lot of Christians that are not accepting of paganism,
Yeah.
but why should we have to be the same back?
Well, yeah, no reason.
So,
No reason.
There's,
I must say the pagans. Go on.
I've been to various churches, certainly not in the one that I was brought up in, but I've been to various churches at various times, and within certain services, let's say, or certain masses, you can feel the energy, you can feel the power of it, and that might well be what those people need, and that's good.
But you mentioned again the energy and the power.
Yeah.
I personally think that it's not what religion you're following, it's the fact that everybody is gathering together in one mind. And if only for 5 minutes in the whole week you come together with other people in the same mind, thinking in the same way,
Sure.
moving in a positive direction and loving each other, I think that in itself is a plus factor.
Yeah.
It's one of the very few I can see in organised religion, to be honest, but I see it is a plus factor. And I think talking about getting together in groups
Sure.
to celebrate anything, if you're all together, you can feel it. You just said it yourself. You can feel it, and you can feel that positive attitude.
I mean, some Druids practice on their own. You know, some are solitary. Some pagan families just have their own family unit, and they would use the festivals for their own ends in that sense. Some, you know, belong to a bigger group. Let's say, you know, whether or not to a Druid order or a Druid grove, and they would come together for the festivals then, and they would all congregate. And it's a much bigger affair.
Interesting.
It's down to choice. It's down to what feels right for the individual.
We have, in actual fact, drawn into our station now, and we have come to the end of our. Very, very interesting it is too, and I should like to perhaps discuss this even further. There's such a lot there to talk about,
Sure.
and I have to say I've enjoyed very much this conversation that we've had.
Likewise.
And thank you very much indeed, Gary.
No, you're more than welcome.
Thank you very much indeed. And tomorrow we have a live demonstration of mediumship. Don't let anybody forget. Doors are open at 7. Tickets will be available on the door, so please don't hesitate to come along. And next week we actually have somebody who's going to come and talk to us about Reiki. Thank you very much, and good night.